Hello, everybody.
Welcome to Throwback Thursday in the Bishop Museum Library and Archives. I'm Hadley Andersen.
I'm DeSoto Brown, the Bishop Museum historian, and today,
What are we going to be talking about?
let's talk about this place that we work,
Really?
Bishop Museum. We work in Bishop Museum, of all things.
Believe that.
Okay, well, we are going to talk about some of the changes that have happened here and just some of the history of Bishop Museum. And to begin with, that you're going to recognize that.
Yes.
Well, sort of. This is the very first Bishop Museum building, and it opened to the public in June of 1891. And it's not, today it doesn't look all that significant, but back in 1891, this was a huge, massive, magnificent building for Honolulu. And Bishop Museum at that time had only 3 exhibit galleries, and that is the Kahili Room, and pardon me while I reach around, the Picture Gallery, and the Vestibule Gallery. Well, even as wonderful as that was,
It seems to be missing quite a bit that we have today.
it is missing quite a bit because it wasn't big enough, even then.
Imagine that.
So even that, yeah, I know, that's a very familiar concept. So very soon after that, in the back, and it was called Polynesian Hall. So this is it right here with our first building right in the front. And Polynesian Hall today is called Pacific Hall because it has been restored and it has new exhibits in it, and it covers not just Polynesia but all of the Pacific.
Right.
And it looks pretty darn wonderful, if I can say so myself.
It's pretty beautiful.
And this actually is the view that's most familiar today, because to that complex of 2 buildings, another building was added in 1900. That's this building here. That's Hawaiian Hall. So the whole thing is called the Hawaiian Hall complex. And even though Hawaiian Hall, the building, was completed in 1900, it wasn't open to the public until 1903. And that's because originally it looked like this. It was a big, wonderful, empty space. And all of this interior is still there today. And Hawaiian Hall's been restored as well. It looks pretty darn magnificent now. But it has changed a great deal in some respects, certainly in the exhibits that are in there. And one of the things that people remember about Hawaiian Hall is what?
The whale.
The whale! And the whale, the life-size whale, is hanging from the ceiling. So in this photograph, the whale hasn't been installed yet, and in fact, none of the cases have been installed in Hawaiian Hall yet, because all of those cases were custom made at a factory in the Midwest. I can't remember exactly where it was. They all got broken down, sent here, and then reassembled in Hawaiian Hall itself before of course, all the exhibits were installed.
And we still have all of those original cases?
We still have almost all the original cases, just 1 or 2 are missing. But basically, Hawaiian Hall looks very much the same way. Although, I will say one thing is very different. Windows.
The windows are open.
That's right. Hawaiian Hall was constructed without electricity. So there was no way for artificial lighting to light up the individual cases. It was lit by individual windows, as you can see, as well as a skylight overhead. And that was the way a lot of museums were lit in those days, and also department stores were built very much the same way. So that's why there's an open space in the center so that light can get in from the skylight to light things. Fortunately,
Also open air, wasn't it?
it was also open air. So, of course, no air conditioning in those days, and it was not air conditioned until about 10 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
So, but in any case, so moving right along, here's Hawaiian Hall, the Hawaiian Hall complex in early 1900s, and all those guys lined up in the front are Kamehameha School students, because the Kamehameha School campus was also where Bishop Museum was too. So Bishop Museum really was built on what was the school campus, and that was so that the KS children, the various students, could use the museum as part of their education.
And also because it was built so far away, right? Because they wanted to be away from Honolulu and all.
Exactly.
Hustle and bustle.
Well, and also too, one of the major things they wanted to avoid was fires, because there was a very significant fire in downtown Honolulu in 1886, as well as an even bigger one in 1900. So this was true in a lot of cities in the United States. There would be massive fires that they didn't want any of the collections near that. So they built Bishop Museum on the school campus, which was quite a far distance from the rest of urban Honolulu. And the Kamehameha School's campus moved up to its present location starting in the 1930s. So they're not here on the campus anymore. Now,
But we still have one building from the
we
Kamehameha
still have Bishop Hall. That's was the original Kamehameha Boys School classroom building, and that's still standing, but very much in need of restoration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, some very important people have visited BishopMuseum, so that's some information about the buildings. But here is President Franklin D. Roosevelt. That's him right there in the hat, and he's visiting BishopMuseum in July of 1934. And as you may know, President Roosevelt was crippled. He had had polio when he was a young adult, and so he couldn't walk. So he was always driven around when he visited Honolulu, certainly, in an open car, as you see here. And because he couldn't get out of the car easily, a display was set up in the courtyard of BishopMuseum, and so artifacts were shown to him while he was sitting in the car. And that's one way of getting around not being able to walk. And another important world leader visited BishopMuseum in 1975, and that was Emperor Hirohito of Japan. Now, ironically enough, during World War II, obviously, President Roosevelt was the head of the United States, and Emperor Hirohito was the figural head of the nation of Japan, and they were enemies, obviously, during World War II, and all of that was forgotten by the time that Emperor Hirohito visited BishopMuseum in 1975, as I said. And even though he was royalty and he was an emperor, and that was his job, you might say, he was also a marine biologist. Did you know that?
I did not.
So he was very interested in marine biology, and so a little display was set up in Hawaiian Hall for some specimens for him to look at.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So there he is walking out of Hawaiian Hall. And there's another celebrity.
Oh my goodness.
Here's a celebrity pictured in Hawaiian Hall in July of 1969. That is Jack Lord. He was the star of the original version of the TV show Hawaii Five-0. And that was on the air from 1969 to 1980. And for their second season, they filmed a show here at BishopMuseum in which a fictional group of hippies broke in and stole Kamehameha's feather cloak.
Oh no.
And so this was, when they filmed in Hawaiian Hall, that was the scene that they filmed there of the cloak being stolen, or not the real one, by the way. And this is Jack Lord when they were shooting in Hawaiian Hall, and I was there and I watched it being filmed.
So you've been on campus for a lot of the Hawaii Five-0 filmings.
Actually, I have. That's true. I've seen not only Hawaii Five-0, both first and second version being filmed, but some other TV shows as well. But you know, if you're old, this is what happened. Well, other people at BishopMuseum have included the staff. So I don't know if you've seen that before. This is in Hawaiian Hall again, and the pillars in the background are still there today. And this is the full staff of BishopMuseum in about 1900. And the man in the center next to the pillars with the beard is William Tufts Brigham. And he was the first director of BishopMuseum for many years. Very instrumental in how the museum was founded and how the first collections were put together and how they were handled. Because not only was the director, he was also the person in charge of all the collections. So that's the full staff. There aren't that many of them. There are only 6 of them. And by 1942, look how big the staff was.
Oh my goodness.
The staff had grown tremendously by 1942. This is the staff of BishopMuseum early in World War II. They are posing wearing gas masks because every civilian in the Hawaiian Islands at the beginning of World War II was issued a gas mask. And so here's the BishopMuseum staff modeling their gas masks because it's World War II. And none of those folks are, well, actually, yes, one of those people is still with us today, who's now 96 years old, and that is Pat Bacon, who's seated right there. She's not at BishopMuseum anymore, but she is still alive. Now, something else that happened during World War II, very interesting, I think.
A very interesting
You know about
story.
this?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, this is Dr. Kenneth Emory, who was an anthropologist and an archaeologist. And during World War II, he created and then taught, as an instructor, something called the Survival Training Course. And that was for men in the military who might find themselves on a Pacific island during the war, maybe marooned because they'd been shipwrecked or their plane had crashed. So Dr. Emory taught them the things that they could eat, and the way they could find shelter and the way they could survive in a tropical environment. And in order to do that teaching, they set up a facility in the courtyard of Hawaiian Hall. So this photograph is from World War II, and in the background is Hawaiian Hall. And they built structures like those that were found in various Pacific Island locations. And as you can see, there are Army and Navy guys in the midst of this who are getting the jungle training, or the survival training course. It wasn't jungle training. They did have also jungle training, but that was a different thing during World War II. So that was Bishop Museum's World War II experience. And we are coming up on the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor that started that. Yep. That'll be at the end of the year. And finally, I want to pay respects and homage to probably our most significant Bishop Museum employee. And this is a photograph of Mary Kavena Pukui in probably the 1930s or 1940s. And she's sitting in front of Hawaiian Hall. And Kavena is absolutely instrumental in the survival of many aspects of Hawaiian culture, the language in particular, but all kinds of other wonderful cultural things. And she dedicated her entire life to preserving, to finding out, to researching, to talking to people, to writing down, recording as much as she possibly could about traditional Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian language. She was one of the co-writers of the Hawaiian Language Dictionary, and it is to her that we owe a great deal of the knowledge that we still have today. And she realized how much of it was being lost and how necessary it was to save it. And so that was her career at Bishop Museum. She started in the 1920s and she worked up until about the early 1970s. And so thank you, Mary Kavena Pukui, for all your work at Bishop Museum.
And we have a lot of her photos and a lot of her stories. And didn't she recorded on, what kind of recording?
She did a number of audio recordings on magnetic tape, reel-to-reel tape in the 1950s and 60s, and their oral histories in which she is interviewing and speaking with and conversing with other older Hawaiian people. And it's not just that they're talking about important subjects, cultural subjects, but they're also speaking Hawaiian in the way that they would have learned it in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So that is yet another one of her legacies that we have, one of the treasures that we have at Bishop Museum that we're very grateful to have, that people can access here at the museum too.
So artifacts are treasures as well as the people who work there.
Absolutely. And the people, and the thing that really is very aware, I'm very aware of now, is we have our physical space, we have our buildings, but the institution itself, regardless of where it's housed and regardless who's working for it, keeps going through the lives of different people. People come, people go, and some are here for a short time, some for a long time, but Bishop Museum keeps going and the collections keep going and all of the wonderful things keep going, and we keep getting the word out to people and teaching people and showing people, and that's why we have our collections.
Thank you for joining us today for this Throwback Thursday.
And we want to remind you that in addition to the things that I just showed you and coming to Bishop Museum in person to see what we have, come to our website too, because that's another way that you'll learn, and you'll also see what we're doing, because we're always doing stuff here. We're always showing things off and having events and new exhibits and old exhibits and lots of wonderful stuff. So I won't be back next week. For the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be taking some time off for vacation, so we won't be having Throwback Thursdays for the next 2 weeks. I don't know what other programming there'll be, but it'll be wonderful.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, and I'll see you folks again, or you folks will see me again in July. And until then, aloha.
Aloha. Thanks for joining us.